I never thought the words that would shatter my entire life would come from my own daughter's mouth, at our Thanksgiving table, in front of 30 family members. "You're not my real dad anyway." The room went silent. Time stopped. And in that moment, 28 years of memories, her first steps, her graduation, walking her down the aisle, all came crashing down around me. What she didn't know was that I had kept a secret locked away for decades, a secret about her real father, who had been sitting at our family table all along, a secret that would tear our family apart and force us all to question what truly makes someone a parent. Is it blood? Is it a signature on a document? Or is it the countless nights spent chasing away monsters, bandaging scraped knees and showing up when it matters most? This is the story of how one moment of brutal truth destroyed everything I thought I knew about family, and the painful journey to discover that sometimes the strongest bonds are formed not by blood or legal documents, but by love that persists through betrayal, absence, and heartbreak. Follow along to discover how far a father's love can stretch before it breaks, and whether some wounds are too deep to ever truly heal. If you're watching this story, make sure to follow the channel for more real-life family dramas that will touch your heart. Like and comment below telling me where you're watching from and if you've ever experienced a family secret that changed everything. I still remember how the air felt that day. Crisp, the kind of November air that carries the scent of fallen leaves and makes your lungs feel alive. Thanksgiving had always been sacred in our family. The one day when everyone, cousins, siblings, in-laws, would push aside their differences and gather around my mahogany table, the one Martha and I had saved for 3 years to buy back in '78. I was carving the turkey, my hand steady despite my 68 years. The knife glided through the browned skin, revealing the juicy meat beneath. My grandchildren were giggling in the corner, playing some game on their tablets that I couldn't understand. The football game hummed in the background, Cowboys losing again. Everything was normal. Everything was as it should be, until it wasn't. "Pass the gravy, Emily," I said to my daughter, trying to make eye contact with her across the table. She'd been quiet all afternoon, picking at her food, barely acknowledging the relatives who'd traveled from as far as Minnesota to be here. "Why don't you ask your precious son-in-law to do it?" she snapped, her voice razor sharp. The table went silent. My son-in-law Mark looked up, confused. He'd always gotten along well with Emily, or so I thought. "Emily, honey, what's wrong?" I asked, placing the carving knife down. She let out a bitter laugh that didn't belong to the little girl I'd raised. "What's wrong? You want to know what's wrong now? After 28 years of lies?" My sister-in-law Judith cleared her throat. "Maybe we should—" "No," Emily cut her off. "I'm done with the secrets. I'm done pretending." Her eyes locked onto mine and I saw something I'd never seen before. Hatred. Pure, undiluted hatred. "Emily, please," I whispered. "Not here. Not now." "When then, Dad?" She spat the word dad like it was poison on her tongue. "Or should I even call you that? Because you're not my real dad anyway." The words exploded across the table like a grenade. 30 pairs of eyes widened in shock. My niece's fork clattered to the floor. My brother-in-law's glass froze halfway to his lips. Time stopped. In that moment I felt my heart crack. Not breaking would have been merciful, but crack, like a windshield hit by a stone, fractures spreading slowly, inevitably outward. Every memory flashed before me. Emily's first steps toward my outstretched arms, her tiny hand in mine on her first day of kindergarten, the nights I'd spent by her bed when she had scarlet fever at age 7, teaching her to drive in the empty parking lot of the Walmart, walking her down the aisle when she married Mark. All of it suddenly felt questioned, invalidated, as if those 28 years had been built on quicksand. I didn't yell back. I didn't defend myself. Instead, I slowly stood up, my knees protesting with a familiar ache. Without a word, I walked to the hallway closet where my old leather briefcase sat on the top shelf. I'd kept it there for 23 years. Never moved it, never opened it, just let it gather dust, like the secrets inside. When I returned to the dining room, the silence was deafening. Even the children had stopped playing, sensing the tension thick as Mississippi mud in the air. I placed the briefcase on the table, the brass latches clicking open with a finality that made me shudder. Inside were papers, yellowed at the edges, creased from that one time I'd almost thrown them away. Adoption papers. I slid them across the table toward Emily. Her hands trembled as she picked them up. You're right, I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. I'm not your biological father. And these papers, I never signed them. Not legally. Not officially. Gasps echoed around the table. Emily's face drained of color as she stared at the document, her anger momentarily replaced by confusion. But not because I didn't want to be your father, I continued. I've been your father in every way that matters since you were 3 years old. I just couldn't sign these particular papers because I looked across the table at my brother-in-law Nathan, who had suddenly become very interested in his napkin. The man who had always been too attentive to Emily. The man whose features I'd pretended not to recognize in my daughter's face. Because your real father has been sitting at our Thanksgiving table for 20 years. In that moment, as 30 pairs of eyes followed mine to Nathan's ashen face, I knew our family would never be the same again, and neither would I. I met Hannah on a rainy Tuesday in April of 1995. I remember it vividly because the weather matched my mood, gray, dreary, and seemingly endless. I was 41 then, already divorced once, working as an accountant at a firm in downtown Minneapolis. My life had fallen into a comfortable routine: work, TV dinners, weekend fishing when the weather permitted. Nothing extraordinary, until Hannah walked into my office. She needed help with her taxes, a single mother struggling to make ends meet. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail and she wore a simple dress that had seen better days. But it was her eyes that caught me, kind but exhausted, like someone who had been carrying a weight for far too long. "This is Emily," she said, gesturing to the little girl half hiding behind her legs. Emily was tiny for a 3-year-old, with blonde curls that didn't match her mother's dark hair and a blue ribbon that had come partially undone. When she looked up at me, I noticed something in her eyes that no child that age should have: a wariness, a guardedness, as if she'd already learned that the world wasn't always kind. "Hi there, Emily," I said, crouching down to her level. "I've got some crayons in my desk. Would you like to draw while your mom and I talk boring grown-up stuff?" She didn't respond, just looked to Hannah for permission. When Hannah nodded, Emily cautiously accepted the crayons and paper I offered, retreating to a corner of my office where she could keep her mother in view at all times. While we went through Hannah's financial situation, which was dire, I found myself watching Emily. She didn't scribble wildly like most children her age. Instead, she drew with careful precision, her little face screwed up in concentration. "She's very focused," I remarked. Hannah's smile was tinged with sadness. "She's had to grow up fast." Later, as they were leaving, Emily suddenly reached up and handed me her drawing, a simple house with 4 stick figures. "Who's in your picture?" I asked gently. "That's Mommy." She pointed. "That's me. That's Grandma in heaven. And that's..." She hesitated, then finished quietly. "Nobody." I noticed Hannah tense beside me. Over coffee the following week, Hannah told me fragments of her story. She'd gotten pregnant young. The father had disappeared when she told him about the baby. Her parents had been supportive, but her mother died shortly after Emily was born, and her father was now in a nursing home with dementia. She was alone, working 2 jobs, and barely staying afloat. What she didn't tell me, what I wouldn't learn until years later, was that the disappeared father wasn't as absent as she claimed. Our relationship developed slowly. First, it was just me helping her organize her finances. Then, it was dinner at my place while Emily played with the toys I'd started keeping there just for her. 6 months in, I was accompanying them to Emily's preschool graduation, feeling a strange mix of pride and caution when she ran up to me afterward, diploma in hand, calling, "Look, Mr. Jim, not Dad, never Dad, not yet." I proposed to Hannah a year after we met. It wasn't a grand gesture, just the 2 of us on my back porch, Emily already asleep inside. When Hannah said yes, she cried, and I thought it was simply happiness. Now I wonder if there was relief mixed in there too. Relief that she'd found someone who would never know the truth. During those early years, I noticed things, small things. How Emily would go quiet whenever Hannah's brother Nathan came to visit. How Hannah would watch them with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. How Nathan would sometimes stare at Emily when he thought no one was looking, with a hunger that made me uneasy. "Your brother seems fond of Emily," I mentioned once, as casually as I could. "Family is important to Nate," Hannah replied, not meeting my eyes. "He doesn't have children of his own." I accepted this explanation. Why wouldn't I? Hannah had never given me reason to doubt her, And some men are just naturally good with kids. Besides, Emily needed all the positive male influences she could get. What a fool I was. One summer evening, I overheard Nathan talking to Emily in the backyard. I was inside, washing dishes, and they were by the swing set I'd built the previous spring. "You look more like your mother every day," he said, pushing her gently on the swing. "Mom says I have her eyes," Emily responded, pumping her legs to go higher. "No," Nathan said so quietly I almost missed it. "You have my eyes." I dropped a plate. It shattered on the kitchen floor and the moment was lost. When I went outside to call them in for dessert, Nathan was teaching Emily how to do a cartwheel, both of them laughing as if nothing significant had passed between them. I told myself I'd misheard. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that even if what I suspected was true, it didn't matter. I loved Hannah. I loved Emily. We were building a life together. But deep down, I knew. And the truth would wait, patient as a spider, for 23 long years before it finally caught us all in its web. 2 years after Hannah and I were married on a warm June evening, she brought up the subject while we were sitting on our back porch. Emily was 7 by then, and had just finished first grade with honors. She was inside, already in bed after a day of swimming at Lake Calhoun, her sun-kissed skin still smelling of chlorine and the strawberry shampoo she insisted on using. "Jim," Hannah said, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass, "I've been thinking about something important." I looked at her, this woman who had brought such unexpected joy into my middle-aged life. The setting sun caught the gold flecks in her brown eyes, making them shimmer like autumn leaves floating on water. Hannah wasn't conventionally beautiful. Her nose was slightly too large, her chin a bit too pointed. But to me, she was perfect. Every line in her face told a story of struggle and perseverance. "What's on your mind?" I asked, reaching across the wicker table to take her hand. "I think it's time you adopted Emily," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "Legally, I mean. She already thinks of you as her father. You've been more of a dad to her in 2 years than her biological father was in her entire life." My heart swelled at the thought. I'd grown to love Emily as if she were my own flesh and blood. From teaching her to ride a bike, 3 skinned knees and a week of persistent trying, to helping her with math homework, she was already showing a gift for numbers that made the accountant in me proud. I'd embraced every aspect of fatherhood with a passion that surprised even myself. "I'd be honored," I said, my voice thick with emotion. Nothing would make me prouder than to officially be Emily's father. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. She leaned across the table and kissed me, her lips tasting of the Chardonnay we'd been sharing. "I'll contact a lawyer tomorrow," she promised. 2 weeks later, the adoption papers arrived in a thick manila envelope. Hannah had already filled out her portions, the blue ink of her signature elegant against the stark legal text. Emily had even signed her name in wobbly letters beneath her mother's, though it wasn't legally required. All that remained was for me to sign the final page, and then we would file them with the county. That night, after both Hannah and Emily were asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with the papers spread before me. I wanted to savor this moment, to appreciate the significance of what I was about to do. Legally binding myself to this child was no small commitment, even though in my heart, the commitment had been made long ago. I flipped through the documents, scanning the legal jargon, the formal language that attempted to quantify the unquantifiable bonds of love and responsibility. And then I saw it. On page 3, in a section detailing the biological parents, was a name I recognized all too well: Nathan Reynolds, Hannah's brother, Emily's uncle. Except, according to this document, he wasn't just her uncle. He was her father. The room seemed to tilt around me. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles turning white as I stared at the name, willing it to change, to transform into the name of some stranger. But it remained stubbornly, accusingly there. Nathan Reynolds. In an instant, 100 small moments rearranged themselves in my mind like puzzle pieces finally finding their proper places. Nathan's intense interest in Emily, the similar shape of their eyes, Hannah's discomfort whenever they were together, Emily's inexplicable wariness around him. I felt sick, betrayed. Not by Emily, never by Emily, but by Hannah. She had lied to me from the very beginning. Her brother, her own brother, was Emily's father. What kind of twisted relationship had they had? Was it consensual? Was it ongoing? The questions swirled in my mind like a toxic tornado. threatening to destroy everything I thought I knew about my life. I carefully gathered the papers and placed them back in their envelope. Then I went to my office and locked them in the bottom drawer of my desk. I didn't tear them up. I didn't throw them away. And I didn't sign them. That night, I lay beside Hannah, listening to her peaceful breathing, and wondered if I even knew the woman I had married. I wanted to wake her, to confront her with what I'd discovered, but something held me back. Fear, perhaps. Not just fear of what the truth might be, but fear of what it would do to Emily if everything came crashing down. Emily. Sweet, serious Emily, who had already known too much instability in her young life. So I made a decision that night. A decision that would haunt me for the next 20 years. I would keep this secret. I would continue to be Emily's father in every way that mattered. I would protect her from whatever ugly truth lay in her past. But I would never sign those papers. Never legally bind myself to a lie. The next morning, when Hannah asked about the adoption papers, I told her I wanted to read through them more carefully before signing. A week later, when she asked again, I said I'd misplaced them. Eventually, she stopped asking, and the unsigned papers remained locked away, a ticking time bomb buried in the foundation of our family. What I didn't realize then was that time bombs don't stay buried forever. Eventually, they explode, and when they do, they destroy everything in their path. Years passed like pages turning in a book, sometimes slowly, savoring each moment, and sometimes in great rushes that left me wondering where the time had gone. Emily grew from a solemn child into a thoughtful teenager. I watched with quiet pride as she blossomed, excelling in school, particularly in mathematics and science. By 15, she was already talking about becoming a doctor, her bedroom walls plastered with anatomy charts instead of boy band posters. Our home settled into rhythms and routines: breakfast together before school, family dinners most nights, weekend outings to museums or hiking trails when Minnesota weather permitted. On the surface, we were the perfect American family. The secret I carried stayed locked away, both literally in my desk drawer and figuratively in the deepest corners of my heart. Hannah never mentioned the adoption papers again. Sometimes I caught her watching Emily and me together with an expression that might have been guilt, or perhaps just wistfulness, but she never brought it up, and I never asked. We had built our life on a foundation of half-truths and omissions, and we both seemed content to let it remain that way. Until Emily turned 16, and everything began to change. It started subtly. She became quieter at dinner, picking at her food instead of eagerly sharing stories about her day. Her bedroom door, once always open, began to stay firmly closed. When I'd ask about school or friends, I'd get one-word answers, her eyes never meeting mine. Teenagers, Hannah would say with a shrug. They all go through phases, but it felt like more than a phase, especially when Nathan came to visit. Nathan had moved to Chicago years ago, his visits becoming less frequent, a fact for which I was secretly grateful. But he made a point of coming for Emily's 16th birthday, arriving with an expensive laptop and his typical too-wide smile. "Uncle Nathan's here," he announced, letting himself in with the spare key Hannah had given him years ago. I was in the kitchen finishing the frosting on Emily's birthday cake, chocolate with raspberry filling, her favorite since she was 7. "Nathan," I nodded, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "Wasn't expecting you until dinner. Thought I'd surprise my favorite niece," he said, setting the gift-wrapped laptop on the counter. There was something proprietary in the way he said, "my niece," that made my stomach clench. After all these years, the knowledge of who he really was to Emily still felt like acid in my veins. Emily came downstairs then, her face lighting up momentarily before settling into an odd, guarded expression. "Uncle Nate," she said, accepting his bear hug with stiff arms. During dinner that night, I watched them interact. Nathan was charming as always, asking Emily about school, her friends, her dreams for the future. She answered politely but tersely, her eyes darting between him and Hannah as if searching for something. Later, I passed by the living room and overheard them talking in low voices. "But why didn't anyone ever tell me?" Emily was asking, her voice tight with emotion. "Some things are complicated, Em," Nathan replied. "Adults make mistakes, sometimes big ones." I stepped into the room, and they immediately fell silent, Emily's face flushing red. "Everything okay in here?" I asked, looking between them. "Just catching up," Nathan said smoothly, standing up. "Think I'll grab another piece of that excellent cake, Jim." After he left the room, I sat beside Emily on the couch. You know you can talk to me about anything, right, sweetheart? She looked at me then, her eyes, so like Nathan's, filled with something I couldn't quite read. Confusion, anger, hurt. Can I? She asked, then stood up and left the room before I could answer. That night I heard her crying in her bedroom. When I knocked, she told me she was fine, just tired. But the wall between us had grown another foot higher. The visits from Nathan became more frequent after that. He'd drop by unannounced, often when I was at work. Hannah seemed uncomfortable with these visits but never objected. And Emily became increasingly withdrawn, especially after these visits. One evening I came home early from work to find Nathan's car in our driveway. Through the living room window I could see him and Emily in what appeared to be an intense conversation. Hannah was nowhere to be seen. I entered quietly through the side door, not deliberately sneaking but not announcing myself either. Their voices carried from the living room. "He's been lying to you all these years," Nathan was saying. "Don't you think you deserve the truth? But Mom, your mother was trying to protect everyone, including herself. But you're old enough now to know the reality of your situation." I stepped into the doorway then, making my presence known. The look Nathan gave me was nothing short of triumphant. Emily wouldn't meet my eyes. "Nathan," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me, "I think it's time for you to leave." After he left, Emily ran upstairs without a word. Hannah emerged from our bedroom, her eyes red from crying. "What did he tell her?" I demanded. "I don't know," Hannah whispered. "But I'm afraid, Jim. I'm afraid of what he might say." 2 months later, Hannah was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer. The disease moved through her with terrifying speed, as if it had been hiding, gathering strength, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Within 6 months, she was bedridden, her once vibrant body reduced to skin stretched over bones. In her final week, she asked to speak with me alone. Emily had gone to school, insisting on maintaining normalcy despite her mother's condition, perhaps needing the escape. "Jim," Hannah whispered, her voice like dry leaves rustling. She reached for my hand, her skin cool and paper-thin. "There's something I need to tell you before—" "Save your strength," I said, kissing her forehead. "No," she insisted. "You need to know. About Nathan. About Emily." My heart froze. After all these years, was she finally going to tell me the truth? "I know," I said quietly. "I've known since the adoption papers I saw his name." Her eyes widened, tears gathering at the corners. "All this time? And you stayed? You loved her anyway?" I nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. "If one day Emily hates you," Hannah said, her grip on my hand surprisingly strong, "don't stop loving her, because only you saved her from what could have been. Only you." She died 3 days later, taking with her whatever else she might have told me. And Emily, my beautiful, complicated Emily, pulled even further away, as if her mother's death had severed the last thread connecting us. A month before that fateful Thanksgiving dinner, I found Emily sitting in her car in our driveway crying so hard her entire body shook. When I opened the passenger door and slid in beside her, she didn't push me away, but she didn't welcome me either. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, aching to pull her into my arms like I had when she was small. She looked at me then, her face ravaged by grief and something else. Something like betrayal. "Sometimes," she whispered, "I wish I didn't know what I know." And in that moment I knew our carefully constructed life was about to shatter completely. After finding Emily crying in the car that day, our relationship transformed into something unrecognizable. The house that had once been filled with comfortable silences now echoed with tense ones. Every word between us felt like walking on glass, careful, measured, afraid of what might shatter beneath our feet. One crisp October morning, I was making coffee when Emily came into the kitchen, already dressed for her shift at the hospital where she volunteered. At 28, she had fulfilled her childhood dream of entering the medical field and was now in her 2nd year of residency. Her white coat hung over her arm, her stethoscope peeking out of her bag. Even with the dark circles under her eyes from too many overnight shifts, she looked so much like Hannah it made my chest ache. "There's fresh coffee," I offered, sliding a mug toward her, our new ritual of polite distance. She took the mug without looking at me, adding cream and sugar with mechanical precision. Then, unexpectedly, she spoke. "You should have told me," she said, her voice flat, emotionless. You deprived me of making my own choices. I froze, the coffee pot suspended over my own mug. Told you what exactly? I asked carefully, though I feared I already knew. Her laugh was brittle, like ice cracking on the lake. Don't insult me by pretending you don't know what I'm talking about. Emily? I set the coffee pot down, turning to face her fully. Whatever Nathan has told you, this isn't about Uncle Nate, she snapped, though the slight flush in her cheeks told me otherwise. This is about you keeping the truth from me my entire life. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 20 years of secrets pressing down on me. What truth do you think I've been keeping, Emily? Her hand tightened around the mug. That you never legally adopted me. That you've known all along that Uncle Nate is my biological father. That Mom and him... She trailed off, unable to say the words. That's what Nathan told you? I asked quietly. He showed me proof, she said, her voice wavering slightly. A paternity test from before I was born. Letters Mom wrote to him. I closed my eyes briefly, imagining Hannah writing such letters. Had she loved him? Had he forced himself on her? The questions that had haunted me for decades remained unanswered, and now they were tormenting Emily too. Did he also tell you why I never signed the adoption papers? I asked. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face. He said you refused because you never really wanted me, that you only stayed with Mom out of pity. The cruelty of the lie stole my breath away. After all these years of loving her, protecting her, this was what she believed? Emily, I said, my voice breaking. I didn't sign those papers because I found out Nathan was your biological father when I was reviewing them. Your mother never told me. I discovered it on my own, and I didn't know what to do with that information. The mug slipped from her hand, shattering on the tile floor. Coffee splashed across our feet, but neither of us moved to clean it up. You're lying, she whispered, but there was uncertainty in her eyes now. I have never lied to you, I said firmly. I may have kept the truth from you, and for that I am sorry. But I have never ever not wanted you. You have been my daughter from the moment I met you, papers or no papers. She backed away from me, shaking her head. I need to go. I'm going to be late. After she left, I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the broken pieces of the mug. It had been one of Hannah's favorites, blue ceramic with yellow sunflowers that Emily had given her for Mother's Day years ago. I carefully picked up each piece, wondering if our family could ever be made whole again. That evening, Nathan called. I hadn't spoken to him since Hannah's funeral, avoiding him at family gatherings, making excuses to be elsewhere when he visited. Jim, his voice oozed false concern. Emily seemed upset today. Is everything all right? I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. What are you trying to do, Nathan? Why are you poisoning my daughter against me? Your daughter? He laughed. That's rich, coming from a man who refused to adopt her. Besides, doesn't she deserve to know who her real father is? A real father is someone who's there, I said through clenched teeth. Someone who bandages skinned knees and sits through dance recitals and helps with science projects. Not someone who shows up 25 years later with DNA and a grudge. You always thought you were better than me. Nathan's voice hardened. Perfect Jim, the savior, raising my daughter while I was shut out. You were never shut out, I countered. You were her uncle. You could have been in her life in that role all along. Hannah never stopped you. But she stopped me from being her father, he hissed. And so did you. Why now? I asked. Why, after all these years, are you doing this? There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was eerily calm. Because I can. Because Emily deserves to know the truth. And because, let's face it, Jim, you're getting old. Someone needs to take care of Emily when you're gone. And who better than her real father? The calculation in his voice chilled me to the bone. This wasn't about love or even truth. This was about possession, control. Stay away from my family, I warned. Our family, he corrected, and hung up. I stood there holding the dead phone, understanding for the first time the true depth of the danger we were in. Nathan wasn't just trying to reveal the truth, he was trying to rewrite our entire history, to erase me from Emily's life and insert himself in my place. Later that night, I overheard him on the phone again. I had gone to check the mail and was walking past his car parked across the street when I heard his voice. She deserves to know who her real father is, he was saying to someone. And once she does, once she understands how Jim has been lying to her all these years, well, let's just say Thanksgiving is going to be very interesting this year. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, the weight of his words settling over me like a shroud. Thanksgiving was just 3 weeks away. Whatever Nathan was planning, whatever final piece of his poisonous puzzle he intended to put into place, it was coming soon, and I had no idea how to stop it. The morning of Thanksgiving dawned with the kind of brilliant clarity that only comes with deep cold. The sun shone brightly through frost-etched windows, casting diamond patterns across my kitchen floor as I prepared the turkey. My hands moved with the muscle memory of decades, salting the skin, stuffing herbs beneath it, massaging butter into every crevice. I'd been making Thanksgiving dinner the same way since before Emily was born. Despite the chaos threatening to engulf our family, I'd insisted on hosting as usual. Perhaps it was stubbornness, or perhaps a desperate attempt to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Emily had agreed to come, though she'd been distant and cold in the weeks leading up to the holiday. She was bringing her husband Mark and their 2 children, my grandchildren regardless of biology, and Nathan would be there too. He'd made sure of that, calling other family members to confirm his invitation, as if he sensed I might try to exclude him. As I worked, I listened to the parade on the television in the living room, the same parade I'd watched with Emily on my lap when she was small, pointing out the giant balloons, her little body warm against my chest. The memory felt like it belonged to another lifetime, another man. By 3 o'clock, the house was filled with the rich aroma of roasting turkey and simmering cranberry sauce. The dining room table was set with Hannah's good china, the set we'd only used for holidays and special occasions. 30 place settings, 30 family members who would witness whatever Nathan had planned. The doorbell rang at 3:15. My sister Janet and her husband Bob were always the first to arrive, eager to help with last-minute preparations. But when I opened the door, it was Emily who stood there, alone. "The kids are with Mark," she said, answering my unspoken question. "They'll be here soon. I wanted to talk to you first." She looked beautiful and painfully grown up in a burgundy sweater dress, her blonde hair, so like Nathan's, pulled back in an elegant knot. But her eyes were troubled, rimmed with the slight redness that told me she'd been crying. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "We can talk in the study." My study had always been a sanctuary, walls lined with books. My old leather chair by the window where I'd read stories to Emily, helped her with homework, listened to her teenage troubles. Now it felt like neutral territory in a war zone. "Uncle Nate called me last night," she said without preamble, perching on the edge of my desk rather than sitting in the chair I offered. "He says he has something to show everyone today, something about you and Mom." My stomach clenched. "Did he tell you what it is?" She shook her head. "Just that it would reveal the truth once and for all." "Dad." Her voice cracked on the word, and I saw the conflict in her eyes. The little girl who had loved me battling with the woman who now questioned everything she knew. "Emily," I said gently, "I don't know what Nathan plans to show you, but I want you to know that everything I've done, every choice I've made has been out of love for you. I may not have always made the right decisions, but they were always made with your best interests at heart." She looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then the doorbell rang again, breaking the moment. "I should help with the guests," she murmured, slipping past me. The house filled quickly after that. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all bringing dishes and hugs and holiday cheer. Mark arrived with the children, 6-year-old Caleb immediately racing to find his cousins, 2-year-old Lily clinging to her father's leg, overwhelmed by the noise and crowd. And then Nathan arrived, striding in as if he owned the place, a bottle of expensive champagne in one hand and a manila envelope in the other. My eyes fixed on that envelope, my heart pounding with dread. "Jim," he greeted me with false warmth, clapping me on the shoulder. "Quite a gathering as always. You do know how to bring the family together." The irony in his voice was unmistakable. Dinner itself was a blur of passing dishes, making small talk, maintaining the facade of holiday happiness while anxiety gnawed at my insides. Emily sat across from me, beside Mark, picking at her food and occasionally glancing nervously at Nathan, who had positioned himself at the other end of the table, a symbolic opposite to my place at the head. It happened during dessert. I was cutting the pumpkin pie, trying to keep my hands steady, when Nathan cleared his throat and stood, tapping his glass with a spoon. "If I could have everyone's attention," he announced, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room, "I'd like to make a toast." All eyes turned to him, forks pausing midway to mouths, conversations dying away. "To family," he said, raising his glass. "To truth," and to finally setting the record straight. My eyes met Emily's across the table. The fear in them mirrored my own. "Nathan," I said warningly, "this isn't the time or place." "Oh, I think it's exactly the right time and place, Jim," he replied, his smile sharp as a knife. "With everyone here to witness." He reached for the manila envelope he'd placed beside his plate. "I have here some documents that I think will interest everyone, especially my niece Emily." "Uncle Nate, please," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not now." "Emily deserves to know the truth," Nathan continued, ignoring her plea. "The truth about her real father, about how Jim here has been lying to her, to all of us, for decades." I saw the confusion on the faces around the table. My nephew Thomas frowned. My sister Janet exchanged a worried glance with her husband. "Nathan, that's enough," I said, my voice firm despite the trembling in my hands. "Enough lies, you mean?" Nathan's eyes glittered with malice. "I agree. Emily, did you know that Jim never legally adopted you? Did you know why?" The silence in the room was deafening. Emily's face had gone pale. "Pass the gravy, Emily," I said, desperate to derail what was happening, to protect her from the public humiliation Nathan was orchestrating. "Why don't you ask your precious son-in-law to do it?" She snapped suddenly, her voice razor-sharp with an anger I'd never heard before. The table went silent. Mark looked up, confused. "Emily, honey, what's wrong?" I asked, setting down the carving knife. She let out that bitter laugh that didn't belong to my little girl. "What's wrong? You want to know what's wrong now? After 28 years of lies?" My sister-in-law Judith cleared her throat. "Maybe we should—" "No," Emily cut her off. "I'm done with the secrets. I'm done pretending." Her eyes locked onto mine, filled with a hatred that pierced me to my core. "Emily, please," I whispered. "Not here. Not now." "When then, Dad?" She spat the word dad like it was poison. "Or should I even call you that? Because you're not my real dad anyway." The words exploded across the dining room. 30 pairs of eyes widened in shock. My niece's fork clattered to the floor. My brother-in-law's glass froze halfway to his lips. Time stopped. In that moment, with Emily's accusation hanging in the air like smoke, I saw Nathan's triumphant smile. He had orchestrated this perfectly, pushed her to the breaking point in front of everyone, ensuring maximum damage. I didn't yell back. I didn't defend myself. Instead, I slowly stood up, my knees protesting with a familiar ache. Without a word, I walked to the hallway closet where my old leather briefcase sat on the top shelf. I'd kept it there for 23 years, never moved it, never opened it, just let it gather dust, like the secrets inside. When I returned to the dining room, the silence was deafening. Even the children had stopped playing, sensing the tension. I placed the briefcase on the table, the brass latches clicking open with a finality that made me shudder. Inside were the papers, yellowed at the edges, creased from that one time I'd almost thrown them away. I slid them across the table toward Emily. Her hands trembled as she picked them up. "You're right," I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. "I'm not your biological father, and these papers, I never signed them. Not legally, not officially." Gasps echoed around the table. Emily's face drained of color as she stared at the document, her anger momentarily replaced by confusion. "But not because I didn't want to be your father," I continued. "I've been your father in every way that matters since you were 3 years old. I just couldn't sign these particular papers because—" I looked across the table at Nathan, who had suddenly become very interested in his napkin, the man whose features I'd pretended not to recognize in my daughter's face for 25 years. "Because your real father has been sitting at our Thanksgiving table for 20 years. All eyes followed mine to Nathan, whose face had gone ashen. The manila envelope fell forgotten from his hand as 30 relatives turned to stare at him in dawning comprehension. In that moment, as the truth finally emerged from decades of shadows, I realized that sometimes the most powerful weapon against lies isn't more lies. It's the unvarnished truth, however painful it might be. The aftermath of that Thanksgiving dinner was like the silence after a bomb detonates. Everyone frozen in the moment, ears ringing, minds struggling to comprehend what just happened. Emily stared at the papers in her hands, her eyes moving back and forth between Nathan's name on the document and the man himself, who sat pale-faced at the other end of the table. "This can't be true," she whispered, but I could see in her eyes that she knew it was. The resemblance between them, once merely a family similarity, now revealed its true nature. Nathan was the first to recover. "Emily," he began, his voice taking on that smooth, manipulative tone I'd come to recognize. "I wanted to tell you so many times, but your mother, don't you dare blame my mother." Emily cut him off, her voice sharp as broken glass. "She's not here to defend herself." The rest of the family sat in stunned silence. My sister Janet had her hand over her mouth. Her husband Bob looked like he might be sick. Their children, Emily's cousins, though now we all understood they were actually half-siblings, stared at their plates, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Mark had moved closer to Emily, his hand on her shoulder, a gesture of support that seemed woefully inadequate for the magnitude of the moment. Their son Caleb, too young to understand what was happening but old enough to sense the tension, had begun to cry quietly in the corner where he'd been playing with his cousins. Emily stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the hardwood floor with a sound that seemed to cut through the thick silence. "I need some air," she said, dropping the papers on the table. Without looking at me, without looking at anyone, she walked out the front door, leaving it open behind her. I wanted to follow her, to explain, to somehow make this right. But what could I possibly say that would undo this damage? How could I explain 25 years of silence? Nathan rose as if to follow her, but I stepped in front of him. "You've done enough," I said, my voice low enough that only he could hear. "Leave her be. She's my daughter," he hissed. "No," I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "Biology doesn't make you a father." One by one, the family members made their awkward excuses and left. Dishes remained half cleared, pumpkin pie untouched, wine glasses still half full. No one knew what to say. How do you make polite conversation after a revelation like that? By 9 o'clock, the house was empty save for me. Emily hadn't returned. Mark had called to say she was with him, that she needed time, that he would take care of her, as if she were ill rather than betrayed. I sat alone at the dining room table, surrounded by the detritus of what should have been a celebration but had become a demolition. My eyes fell on a small handprint turkey decoration that Emily had made in kindergarten, which I still put out every Thanksgiving. I'd written the date on the back, 1997. She was 5 years old. Her handprint was tiny, pressed in brown paint on construction paper, with colorful feathers made from her fingertips. "I'm thankful for my daddy," she had dictated to her teacher, who wrote it in careful printing beneath the turkey. That night I wept for the first time since Hannah died. Not quiet tears, but gut-wrenching sobs that left me gasping for breath, doubled over at the table where my family had just been shattered. The days that followed passed in a gray haze. Emily didn't call. Mark texted once to say they were staying with his parents for a while. Nathan, surprisingly, also disappeared. Perhaps even he had the decency to feel some shame. A week after Thanksgiving, I made a decision. This house, once filled with laughter and love, now echoed with absences. Every corner held a memory that cut like a knife. Emily learning to walk across the living room floor. Hannah and I dancing in the kitchen to old Motown songs. The three of us painting the dining room that awful mustard color that Hannah had insisted was warm and inviting. I called a realtor, I called a moving company. I started packing up 30 years of life into cardboard boxes labeled with black marker. Kitchen, books, photos. I couldn't bear to look at the photos, so I packed them away without opening the albums. By Christmas, I had moved into a small bungalow on the east side of town, closer to the lake. It was a fraction of the size of our family home. Just one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a living room with a fireplace that didn't work. But it was enough for me. More than enough, really, for a man suddenly alone. I didn't put up a Christmas tree, didn't hang stockings, didn't send cards. What would I write? Season's greetings from the man who isn't really your father, uncle, or grandfather. The family divided like cells splitting under a microscope. Some called to check on me. Janet came by with a casserole and awkward sympathy. Others aligned with Nathan, believing his version of events, that I had known all along, that I had deliberately kept Emily from knowing her real father, that I had somehow wronged both of them by raising her as my own. New Year came and went. Winter deepened, the Minnesota cold seeping into my bones in a way it never had before. I developed a routine. Wake up, make coffee, stare out at the lake, go for a walk if the weather permitted, return home, read until bedtime. Repeat. I stopped answering the phone, stopped checking email, stopped participating in the world. One particularly bitter February morning, I shuffled out to get the mail, bills mostly, and flyers for local businesses. But there, beneath a pizza coupon, was an envelope with no return address, just my name in unfamiliar handwriting. I brought it inside, examining it cautiously before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded around another, smaller envelope. The note read simply, "Found this in Mom's things. Thought you should have it. E." My hands trembled as I opened the smaller envelope. Inside was a letter, written in Hannah's flowing script, dated just weeks before her death. "My dearest Jim, if you're reading this, I'm gone and Emily has found out the truth. I always knew this day might come. Nathan threatened many times over the years to tell her, especially after I became sick. He saw it as his opportunity to finally claim her as his own. What he doesn't know, what I never told anyone, is that he was never worthy of being her father. The night Emily was conceived was not a night of love, Jim. It was a night I've tried to forget for 28 years. My own brother, drunk and angry, took something from me that I never gave willingly. I didn't tell you because I was ashamed. I didn't report it because he was family, and I was afraid. When you came into our lives, you were like a miracle, a good man who loved my daughter as his own. You saved us both. If Emily discovers the truth and turns against you, show her this letter. Tell her that the only man she should ever call father is you, the man who chose to love her, who protected her, who stayed. I'm sorry for the secrets. I'm sorry for the pain they will cause, but I am not sorry for loving you, and I am not sorry that you became Emily's father. It was the best decision I ever made. All my love, always, Hannah." I sat on my front step, the letter clutched in my hand as snow began to fall gently around me. Hannah's final secret, revealed too late to save our family, but perhaps, just perhaps, not too late to begin healing the wounds. The letter didn't make its way to Emily that winter. I couldn't find her, didn't know where she and Mark had settled after leaving his parents' home. I kept it safe, tucked away in my bedside drawer, waiting for the day when she might be ready to read it, waiting for the day when she might be ready to forgive. The months stretched into a year. One Thanksgiving passed, then another. No family gathered around my small table. No grandchildren's laughter filled my quiet house. I aged in that solitude, my hair turning from salt and pepper to full silver, new lines etching themselves around my eyes and mouth. Not laugh lines anymore, but marks of loneliness. I became a ghost in my own life, haunting the edges of a world that continued to spin without me. The third winter after that fateful Thanksgiving arrived with a vengeance. Minnesota had always been known for its brutal winters, but this one seemed determined to break records. Snow piled in drifts taller than mailboxes, and the lake behind my house froze so solid that people drove trucks across it to ice fish. I had grown accustomed to my solitude. The small bungalow no longer felt temporary. I had made it mine, in small ways. Bird feeders hung outside every window, bringing flashes of red cardinals and blue jays against the white landscape. I'd finally fixed the fireplace, teaching myself from YouTube videos, and now spent my evenings reading beside its warmth. A local stray cat had adopted me, appearing each morning for breakfast and sometimes deigning to sleep at the foot of my bed. It wasn't happiness, but it was peace, a kind of acceptance that this was my life now. At 71, I had stopped expecting anything more. The Sunday the stranger came was unusually mild for February. The snow had paused, and a weak sun made a rare appearance, casting long blue shadows across the pristine white. I had just returned from my daily walk along the lakeshore when I saw him. A young man, perhaps in his early 20s, standing uncertainly on my front porch. He wore a dark blue parka and a Minnesota Twins baseball cap, his hands stuffed deep in his pockets against the cold. There was something familiar about the way he stood, the set of his shoulders, that made my heart skip a beat. "Can I help you?" I called as I approached, my breath clouding in the frigid air. He turned and I stopped dead in my tracks. I was looking at eyes I knew, hazel eyes flecked with gold, just like Emily's, just like Hannah's. "Mr. Pearson?" he asked. "Jim Pearson?" I nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in my throat. "My name is Caleb," he said. "Caleb Williams. I'm Emily's son. Your grandson." The word hung between us like a tangible thing. Grandson. I had a grandson standing before me. A young man now, not the 6-year-old boy I remembered from that last Thanksgiving. "Caleb," I finally managed. my voice rough with emotion. "You've grown." His smile was tentative, nervous. "That happens, I guess." We stood there awkwardly for a moment, the wind picking up around us, stirring the snow into tiny cyclones at our feet. "Would you like to come in?" I asked. "It's too cold to stand out here." He nodded, following me into the small living room where the fire was still burning low in the grate. I busied myself adding another log, using the moment to collect myself, to steady my trembling hands. "Mom said you moved," Caleb said, looking around at the modest space. "But she didn't know where." I straightened up, turning to face him. "How did you find me?" "Aunt Janet," he replied. "She didn't want to give me your address at first, but I convinced her it was important." I gestured for him to sit, taking the chair opposite. "And is it important?" Caleb unzipped his parka but didn't remove it, as if unsure how long he'd be staying. "Mom asked me to give you something," he said. He reached into an inner pocket and pulled out a familiar envelope, the same one I had sent to Emily nearly 2 years ago, containing Hannah's letter. My heart sank. Was Emily returning it unread? Was this her final rejection? "She said to tell you she's sorry it took so long," Caleb continued, holding out the envelope. "She wanted to come herself, but, well, she wasn't sure if you'd want to see her." I took the envelope with unsteady fingers. "I've missed her every day," I said simply. Caleb nodded, a flash of understanding beyond his years crossing his face. "She misses you too. She talks about you a lot, especially when she's teaching Lily and me things you taught her." The mention of my granddaughter, who would be 5 now, nearly the same age Emily had been when she made that handprint turkey, sent a fresh wave of grief through me. "How are they?" I asked. "Your sister? Your father?" "They're good," Caleb said. "Dad got a promotion last year, so we moved to Rochester. Lily started kindergarten in the fall. She's really smart. Mom says she gets that from you." I smiled despite the ache in my chest. "Your mother was always the smart one in the family." Caleb looked down at his hands, then back up at me with those familiar hazel eyes. "She cried when she read the letter," he said quietly. "I've never seen Mom cry like that before. For days afterward, she would just sit and stare at nothing. Dad was really worried about her." I opened the envelope, expecting to find Hannah's letter, perhaps with a note from Emily. Instead, I found the adoption papers, the same ones I had kept for 23 years, the ones I had never signed. But there was something different about them now. A new page had been added, crisp and white against the yellowed originals. At the bottom, where a child over 18 could legally consent to adoption, was Emily's signature, fresh ink, recently signed, and beneath it, a note in her handwriting. "Now I understand, and I love you as I never knew how to love before." My vision blurred as tears filled my eyes. I looked up at Caleb, who was watching me with a mixture of curiosity and compassion. "There's more," he said, reaching into his pocket again. He pulled out a smaller piece of paper, folded in half. "Mom said to give you this too." Inside was an address in Rochester, and below it, "If you're willing, we'd like you to come for Sunday dinner next week. I have so much to tell you, so much to apologize for. And Lily keeps asking when she'll meet her grandpa Jim, the one in all the pictures. With all my love, your daughter, officially now, Emily." I couldn't speak. The emotions were too overwhelming. Joy, relief, disbelief all tangled together in my chest, making it hard to breathe. Caleb waited patiently, seeming to understand the magnitude of the moment. Finally, he spoke again, his voice gentle. "Uncle Nathan died last year," he said. "Cancer. Mom went to see him at the end, but she said it wasn't the same, that he was never really her father, just someone who shared her DNA." I nodded, feeling a complicated mix of emotions at the news of Nathan's death. There was no joy in it, just a sad recognition that some damage can never be fully repaired. Some choices leave permanent scars. "She found the rest of Grandma's letters after he died," Caleb continued. "He had kept them all these years. That's when she understood everything." He looked down, clearly uncomfortable with the implication of what everything meant. I reached out and put my hand over his. This young man's hand. My grandson's hand. "Some truths are heavy burdens," I said. "Your mother is strong to have carried this one." Caleb nodded, then checked his watch. "I should get going. It's a long drive back to Rochester, and they're predicting more snow tonight. Will you be okay driving?" "You could stay," I offered, suddenly desperate not to lose this connection, this bridge back to my family. He smiled. Emily's smile. Hannah's smile. "I'll be fine. But I'll see you next Sunday, right?" Mom's making pot roast. It was always your favorite, she said. I nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. At the door, Caleb surprised me by pulling me into a quick, strong hug. She never stopped loving you, he whispered. Even when she was angriest, she never stopped. After he left, I sat by the fire for hours, the adoption papers in one hand, Emily's note in the other. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and steady, covering the tracks Caleb had made leading to my door. But this time the snow didn't feel like isolation. It felt like a clean slate, a fresh start. In that moment, I understood something that had eluded me for years. Family isn't defined by blood or by legal documents. It isn't even defined by presence. Family is defined by love that persists through absence, through anger, through misunderstanding and pain. Love that waits, patient as winter waiting for spring, for the moment when reconnection becomes possible. As the fire burned low and the snow continued to fall, I began to plan my trip to Rochester, to my daughter, to my family, to the home I had thought was lost forever but had simply been waiting for me to find my way back. Family isn't always defined by blood or legal documents. Sometimes it's built through years of quiet sacrifices, of showing up day after day, of choosing love even when it's difficult. In my story, I lost everything in a single moment when the truth came to light. But what I eventually found was something even more precious: forgiveness and understanding that transcended biology and betrayal. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have signed those adoption papers knowing what I knew? Would you have revealed the truth sooner, or kept it hidden forever? The choices we make to protect those we love can sometimes become the very things that hurt them the most. But perhaps the measure of true love isn't found in perfect decisions, but in the willingness to remain steadfast, even when everything falls apart. My journey from that devastating Thanksgiving to the snowy day when my grandson appeared on my doorstep taught me that time doesn't heal all wounds. Love does, and sometimes that love must wait patiently, through seasons of absence and pain, for the moment when hearts are ready to find their way back to each other. If this story touched your heart, please consider following this channel for more real-life stories that explore the complicated, beautiful mess that is family. Like, share, and tell me in the comments, what does being a parent truly mean to you?